So this is part 1 of my series of unknown length on China. Now, I say unknown length because I originally wanted to do one episode on the US-China relationship today. You know, why it's important, the challenges we face, all that stuff. But in order to do that, we need to talk about the opening to China in 1972. But then you can't understand that without talking about the Chinese Revolution and the rise of the Communist Party and Mao Zedong. But why stop there? China has the longest continuous history of any country in the world. Now, we can't cover all 3,500 years of it, but I do want to talk about some of it because, as continuous alludes, modern China is very much shaped by ancient China. Chinese written characters first evolved 4,000 years ago, way before ancient Greece. And it's the same writing system used by over 1 billion people today, which is wild. Now, I've read so much about China over the years, but most of this series will come from this book, this one right here, On China by Henry Kissinger. And I'd actually like to start with one of my favorite stories because I think it brilliantly highlights the stark cultural differences between the US and China. Now, it was 1793, okay? And at this point, Britain had been trying and failing to access the Chinese market for quite some time. The Chinese had no interest. So they sent one of their best, right? Lord George Macartney, a diplomat with a keen sense of Oriental diplomacy. The goals were simple. They just wanted to build an embassy and establish fair trade between the two states. So after a month of ceremonial niceties and literally one meeting with the emperor, the mission ended with a letter from the emperor to King George, which is perhaps one of the most insightful and hilarious letters from history. I'm going to read you part of it, but I really suggest that you guys read the whole thing. So, as for the supposed benefits of British trade to China, Macartney was sadly mistaken. He said, "Strange and costly objects do not interest me, as your ambassador can see for himself. We possess all things." Britain had nothing to offer that China wanted. Then, and this is my favorite part, the emperor assured King George that he was, quote, "aware of the lonely remoteness of your island, cut off from the world by intervening wastes of sea." Harsh. See, this indifference to foreign intervention is one of those ancient ideals that have carried through modern times. Western culture and religions, they're very much missionary. A core feature of American exceptionalism, for example, is that we have an obligation to spread our values to the rest of the world. The Chinese feel exactly the opposite. They don't try to spread their ways. In fact, ancient leaders would say that others would not even be capable of attaining their superior culture. The nation state and international diplomacy were really European concepts that formed out of necessity to coexist alongside a multitude of independent nations. China, on the other hand, was the richest and most productive economy in the world for centuries. And because of its size, it was entirely self-sufficient. As the emperor's letter demonstrates, it had no interest in diplomacy because it had no need for it. But the British didn't give up. If China would not open its doors willingly, then they would tear them down themselves. The British, and later the French, started smuggling opium into China, which set off the 2 opium wars and brought the Qing dynasty to its knees, ushering in what the Chinese refer to as the century of humiliation. But perhaps the most important feature of ancient China is Confucianism. The set of values derived from the philosopher Confucius is the closest thing China has to an official religion, and the Analects, which is a book of his ideas and sayings, is kind of like the Chinese Bible and the Constitution all rolled into one, because it's a code of ethics for the individual as well as a guiding force for the state. Confucianism is based on the belief that human beings are essentially good, but they do bad things when they don't have a strong moral compass. So the society needs that strong compass to follow, and that will in turn lead to prosperity for the state, the ultimate goal being universal harmony. Now, this isn't a lesson in Confucianism, but I bring it up because it is essential to understanding Chinese culture and how it differs from the West, such as the emphasis on the community versus the individual. China's Confucius principles and view of its role in the world are just some of the many ancient ideas that still shape the China we know today. These ideas have survived incredibly dramatic changes, which we're going to cover some of them in this series. And that's why I wanted to prime you with this video. So while China may seem like a contradiction to the outsider, how does a communist government oversee the biggest economic transformation in history? Is it even communist? Isn't it capitalist? Confucian? It's formed an identity that is uniquely its own, in fact. It is socialism with Chinese characteristics, as Deng Xiaoping would say. Oh, we'll get to him. Don't worry.